Okay, let me see if we're going live on Facebook here.
You are, it says.
Yes, it is.
It is. Okay, give me a second to get seated here again. And all right, everybody, welcome to a very special Christmas, or maybe post-Christmas. It's December 26th. Welcome to another very special episode of Hollywood Kitchen. And I'm so excited today. We have got Peter Riva, Marlene Dietrich's grandson, who has graciously agreed to join us, and also my friend and frequent Hollywood Kitchen guest, Benjamin, joining us from Germany. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today. Peter, before we get started, Benjamin and I have so much to talk about, but let's talk for a minute about how you first knew your grandmother was a world famous movie icon. I always wondered that question, like how do people kind of put those pieces together and figure out who their relative was?
Well, bear in mind that I'm an old guy. So I was born in 1950. So I grew up at a time when both my mother was a famous television actress and Marlene theater and television, and my grandmother was world famous. And so there was never a question that I didn't think she was famous. I didn't, until I think I was 3 or 4, I wasn't aware that she was making movies and that sort of thing, because until you're 3 or 4, you don't really watch movies or television, that sort of in that era. There's a wonderful, my mother solved some of the problems for me when I was a kid, because any time we got in a taxi cab in Manhattan, the driver would turn around and say, "Hey, Maria, how are you? It's great to see you, Maria. You were terrific on TV last night," et cetera, et cetera. And the few times that I get in a cab with Marlene, it was always, "Miss Dietrich, where can I take you? Of course, so honored to have you in the cab." And I said to my mom one day, "Why do they call you Maria and they call her Miss Dietrich?" And my mother said, "It's because I'm on the box in their living room and she's 40 feet tall at the theater."
Wow, that makes sense.
Great.
And so mom was part of everybody's life, daily life, because if they watched TV, she was intimate with them in their living room. Marlene, on the other hand, was untouchable because 40 feet high on a silver screen. So there was a difference in people's perception and understanding. And as a kid, I understood that. Now, you have to know that my brother, Michael, God bless him, he couldn't, the maid that we had at the time, housekeeper, she couldn't refer to Marlene as Marlene. She called her Miss Dietrich when she was in the house. And Michael changed Miss Dietrich. It came out as Mossy, and over the years, that became her family nickname. You know how grandchildren always name their grandparents? Michael named Marlene Mossy. That's our family name for her. And I knew there were 2 different people there. There was my grandmother, who, when she came to the house, she was the Berliner matriarch of the family, and what she said goes, and you do exactly what she tells you to do. Don't deviate, don't change. You can ask her later, but no, you do what she says. And she would cook and take care of things and so on. And that's when she was around. And then if the phone would ring while she was making dinner for Michael and I, for example, and it was somebody to do with business, she'd take the receiver and you'd see her whole body posture change. And she would suddenly become Marlene. And then Michael and I would refer to her as Marlene after that.
Interesting.
It's not really schizophrenic, but there was you allowed her to have her role that she was playing. She was either being grandmother or professionally, that is everything. And, you know, my mother uses a term for Marlene, which is an excellent one, Pflicht. It's a good German word. It means responsibility, duty, but it has that connotation of Pflicht, a whip. And Marlene took that really seriously. And I'm afraid she's given all of us, you know, hand-me-down generations, that sense of responsibility. You don't give up, you keep going, you do it the right way or don't do it at all. And so her life was like that.
I think that was her life's work, wasn't it? As far as what I read and I heard interviews that
Yeah.
this was her life's work and I think she even talked about her as Dietrich, so she would know what the image would be and what she looked like and everything. So I think, yeah, that's what her life's work was.
She referred to herself in the third person when it was talking about her profession. Dietrich has to do this, Dietrich has to do that. She understood the role that Dietrich played in the world. The other thing is, people always, and this ties in with the end of her life that nobody ever understood. Oh, she's a recluse. No, she wasn't Greta Garbo. That's all nonsense. Her thing was and bear in mind, this is a woman who never had her teeth capped, never had any plastic surgery, never had anything artificial like that done to her body. And came a point where the image just didn't match people's imagination. And she realized that. Now, she was drinking, she'd fall down, it was easier for her to stay in bed, all of that's true, but how to remove yourself from public perception? You let people think you're a recluse, but my wife and I would get the bills from Paris and somehow find the money to pay. Her phone bill sometimes was $5,000 a month. This is not a woman who was, a recluse in any way, shape, or form.
To be alone with Dietrich at all.
Say again, sorry?
None of the Garbo line, I want to be alone, applied to Dietrich.
No. But would she refuse to see people who were old friends and she'd talk to them on the phone, but she didn't want that image to be broken for people around the world who really loved what she had created. And she felt a responsibility towards them. It wasn't the least vain human being that you could ever possibly meet. She thought about herself zero, nothing, nada, not important. But what she created and the pleasure it gave people, that was her job, her responsibility, and she never shirked that responsibility. And I can only have incredible respect for her. At the same time, it's like my mother said when we buried Marlene. When the service was over, my mother went over to her grandmother's grave, Marlene's mother's grave, and said, now that you have her back, teach her how to love. Because Marlene had denied herself that self-indulgence of total love. Infatuation, I love this song, I love this person, this woman, this man, this costume designer, I love, there was a lot of passion in her life. But that feeling of true love, of being vulnerable enough and selfish enough to do it for oneself, she never had that. She never did that. And I think sociologists in the future will make a study of it and find out exactly how and why this happened. A lot of it is a product of when she was born, 1901. We're coming up on her 120th birthday. Her first father, who was clearly a rogue, I love it. The American press always refers to him as a policeman. When you're in the Royal Guard, you're hardly a policeman, but that's okay. They found him a job because his older brother was a von Dietrich. He wasn't von Dietrich because he was a younger brother. So they had to give him a job, and he was screwing anything that moved. So they got him a job, with the green uniform. You know what I'm talking about, Benjamin. I know. He had the, it's like the second son of the royals. You find him a job, and they found him that job, and he had to marry, and his best friend was involved with a woman that his family wasn't allowing him to marry because he was, again, the older son, and he couldn't marry somebody who was beneath his station, and the family refused. So he convinced his best friend, my great-grandfather, to marry his partner. And they had a child pretty soon after that, Liesel. And if you look at Liesel and then you look at von Losch, they could be twins.
Interesting. I think was it very Prussian, her upgrowing, I think.
Yeah,
very much. In those days, children weren't allowed to talk when adults were in the room, or not allowed to talk while they were eating or something. And I think that was what the duty, the Pflicht came from. Responsible and,
Yeah.
control of yourself and your emotion and things, I think.
You're absolutely right. Uber Victorian, I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, what they went through at that time. And of course, then her father dies as a consequence of some of his earlier sexual behaviors. And then because of the change in Germany and everything at that time, von Losch said, to hell with it, I'm marrying the woman I have always loved. And he marries Marlene's mother. And then, of course, he died. So Marlene was sort of torn and twisted in between. And I think part of that focused her attention even more on finding resources within herself. And that's one of the great things about her, is that she would take on a job, any job she wanted, and find a way from inside herself to learn, to adapt, to perfect it. This is not a woman who was, she went to, the Reinhold Theater and all that. She did some training. She could play the violin and she could play the accordion. At that time, a lot of young ladies did learn these things. That isn't the point. The point is the strength that she had to continue and go on and have this drive. No ambition, zero vanity, duty. It's a whole different game. That's why people never understand, she really wanted that acting part. No, she never wanted an acting part, never in her life. She had to be talked into it each time. But when she accepted, then she took it really seriously. The only movie she ever made that she didn't enjoy at all, she respected the work of the people she was with, and she respected the outcome of the movie. She thought it was important. But she hated every minute making that movie was Judgment at Nuremberg. Because in that movie, she had to say a line that made her throw up. And that is where she's actually, if you want to know what her mother was like, the role that she does in Judgment at Nuremberg, she played her mother. I mean, she's just being her mother. And she says, we didn't know. How could you believe that we knew? And she couldn't say it in the rehearsals. She couldn't say it. She wasn't going to say it. No, you have to take that out. I'm leaving. And it was Spencer Tracy who took her aside and said, Marlene, the whole movie hangs on that one sentence. You have to say it. Burt Lancaster's part doesn't matter. My part doesn't matter. Maximilian Schell's part doesn't matter. By the way, incidentally, it's a fun thing for you. You might like this, Benjamin. The assistant to the prosecutor, I've forgotten his name in the moment, senior moments, it was Bill Shatner, who went on to play Captain Kirk.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's a little bit of movie trivia for you, which is kind of fun. It's his first big break, being the assistant to the prosecutor. But, all her other movies that she did them reluctantly, but once she accepted, then she was serious about it. And God forbid she worked with somebody who was an amateur. She just say you can't be that. She saw dishonesty in people who wouldn't do the best they could do. And that's why the cameramen and the lighting men and the cable pullers and everything loved her. They absolutely loved. Nobody ever thought she was rude or anything else, because she would say, no, that cable's going to be in my way. And the cable puller would move it. And he respected her for knowing that he was going to get in trouble if she tripped on that cable. She was an interesting woman from that point of view. She was very generous working with people, although some people she worked with didn't enjoy it so much, like Jean Arthur, but that's okay.
I think what you just said, there's this famous screen test she did for the Blue Angel.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely, I thought, oh, well, she's so cool. And she, as you said, she isn't eager to do this part. She's just doing this number, and she's angry with the piano player. And she had this very Berlinish sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Galgenhumor.
Absolutely, yeah. And she enjoys singing a song, but I think she's totally cool. It's not, oh, I need to play this part. So it happened, and I think she wondered why this happened to her.
I think to a large extent, but once she knew that that's the direction it was going to go, Poppy, my grandfather, and her, they were serious about doing it the right way, including my mother says in her book, which I strongly encourage people to read. I'll tell everybody a little story about the book in a minute, but in the book, Mom explains that they went out at night to find prostitutes and talk to them about what they wear and how they wear it and how quick some of the clothing has to come off and come on, and what kind of clothing do you use. And so the costume in the Blue Angel, that was entirely Marlene. She and Poppy, you know, they borrowed some stuff from some prostitutes just to make it look right.
One thing that strikes me about Dietrich is when you hired her for a film, you got a full-on collaborator. She didn't just hit her and say her line. She was involved in costume design, probably production design, cinematography. Like, she was a full-on artistic collaborator to the point where she almost feels like a co-author of her films.
Well, Carrie, you're 100% right. The thing is, she was a great student. This is a woman of huge intellect. And she would learn very quickly. And she never forgot the people she learned from. You know, in 1936, 37, 38, when she was in Paris, she would phone people up who used to work at UFA, but because they were Jewish, they couldn't work there anymore. She'd phone them up and say, you know, I'm in Paris. I'd love to see you and your children. She remembered names and people. And she knew when they'd been let go from UFA because of the problems being Jewish. And she would say, get on the train and come. I'll send you tickets for the train. Bring your family and bring a suitcase. You'll stay for a little while. And they'd show up and she would greet them at the train station and she'd hand them 2 suitcases full of food and tickets to go to Portugal. Keep going. She knew what was coming. She and Poppy knew exactly what was coming. And so now, Robbie Lance, who's the great agent, you know, for Elizabeth Taylor and all those others, Robbie Lance, meantime, is in New York, and they're arranging to bring Peter Lorre over and Billy Wilder over because America allowed you to come in here if you had a special talent. Well, of course, Peter Lorre had a special talent, and so did Billy Wilder. But the cable puller, the lighting guy, the makeup family, they had no special talents. They couldn't get a visa. But Marlene would just have them come to Paris and then tell them, keep going to Portugal, all the way to Portugal. Because Poppy had identified Portugal as staying neutral. And so he just moved them all there. And some of those families she heard of in the 50s and 60s and then lost contact. It didn't matter to her whether they thanked her or not. What was important is she did what she could. It wasn't very much, but she did what she could. It's when Mom was writing the book, there was an interesting thing that happened because we're talking about Paris here. When Marlene and Poppy closed, Poppy had an apartment in Paris. He was doing the dubbing. He was the director for dubbing all of Paramount's films in Europe. And so when he closed his apartment, they put all his possessions and her stuff in crates and put it in storage. And in 91 and 92, I was bringing all the storage of Marlene from around the world to sort it out. And we brought these boxes from Paris that had not been opened since 1939. Eventually, they all go to Berlin. They're in the Film Museum. I refuse to call it the new name. I like the Film Museum Berlin better. I get in trouble for that. And they were a little bit shocked when they went through the material in those boxes, which had never been seen since 1939. All the dialogue in my mother's book comes from letters that were in that storage that my mother had a photographic memory and remembered. And she wrote all the dialogue in her book are actually quotes from the letters, word for word.
Yeah, that's so interesting. There's a telegram. It's part of the Marlene Dietrich collection in Germany. It's from 1932, when your grandfather said, don't come back to Germany. And at that time, I think she just finished a film in Hollywood and she wanted to come back and she wanted to see her sister and her mother. But even then, it was 1932. He said, no, don't come back. Don't come to Germany. I think she went to Salzburg, to Austria then, but didn't came back to Germany.
Right. Austria was still okay. His parents were in Austria, so he was Czech-Austrian border. So he, you know, his parents said it was still okay, Austria. She and Poppy were so intelligent that very early on they knew where the danger was coming. To be honest with you, sometimes I feel the same potential is here in America at the moment, and I'm watching very carefully. I mean, it's very frightening. Ignorance and misuse of people's innocence can lead to disastrous consequences. And I don't for a moment, somebody asked me recently, what is the best movie on the Second World War you've ever seen? And I said, it's Kenneth Branagh's movie about the Wannsee Conference. If you haven't seen that, I urge you to see it. I urge you to see it because it's boring, mundane people making dreadful decisions. And that's the reality of authoritarian regimes. It's not some high flyer, conceptual person who causes disasters. It's really mundane, petty, little boring people, when given power, make terrible decisions. It's a great movie. Sorry, didn't mean to digress. It's day after Christmas. I should be happier, and tomorrow's her birthday. So there you go.
Happy note, though. I do want to get the cooking part kind of out of the way, because once I get that part done, I can relax a little bit more.
Go for it.
And our recipe today comes from a 1938 cookbook that's kind of rare. I don't have it with me here in Georgia, where I'm at my family home today, but I think it's called Favorite Food of Famous Stars. And this Marlene Dietrich banana bread recipe is in it. So I thought that sounded like something I could actually do, and also a very festive holiday thing to have between Christmas and New Year's. So I thought that's what we'd make today. So Peter, are you gonna cook along with us, or just watch Benjamin and I cook?
Well, no, I'm happy to go along with you. I'm not making it myself. I've done all my baking for the Christmas holiday. I have to remind people that bananas were a rarity still in Europe. And one of the things that she loved about America was that you could get pretty much anything you wanted from anywhere in the world in America. And bananas were like, holy cow, you can just go to the store and buy bananas? How fantastic. And so this is an American recipe that she used to make, to be honest with you, for my mother, that turned out to be something my grandfather, Poppy, always liked and was always made for him as well.
So you confirmed just now, this is an authentic Dietrich recipe.
Oh yeah. She made this when I was a kid, little variations. She stopped putting walnuts in it. She preferred pecans. So she changed the recipe in later life. Frankly, I think she's right. Pecans are a little bit nicer to eat than walnuts, but that's just my own, taste. And she'd make it with almonds sometimes too, but that was only in California because they have wonderful almonds in California. And Poppy used to love almonds, so she used to make it with almonds as well.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking when I read the recipe. I thought, well, this is kind of exotic for a German woman having bananas at that time. It's it's quite special.
Yeah, absolutely. But she loved that about America. That she used to train. She'd find the butcher she wants to buy meat from, because back in the 30s and 40s, 50s, there were still butchers instead of the supermarket. And she'd go to the butcher and she'd teach them how to cut the meat the way she wanted it cut. She would go to the greengrocer, Gristedes in California, and say, no, I want you to get it this. No, that's not a good quality. You have to get them greener so that they ripen in the red. She would educate people, and she was never wrong. That's the thing that was sometimes as a child for my brother Michael and I was a little bit difficult is, damn it, she was never wrong. So yeah, go ahead, start your baking. I love it. I want to see you put it together.
Right now, I've thanks to my mom and dad who are helping me behind the scenes here today. We've already got the oven preheated. On my next bake, we wound up doing 350 degrees for 50 minutes.
Hang on, Carrie. Hang on. You've got the oven preheated. Are you using the thermostat inside the oven, or are you just turning the knob? I'm going to be Dietrich for you here.
Okay. Oh boy. We pushed a button.
No. You got to have a thermometer in the oven, or it's no good. Okay. You can't trust the dial or the push button on your stove. No, it's got to you have to have a thermometer in the oven.
The ingredients we will need here include 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, which we have right here. 3/4, I think it says, a teaspoon of soda. 1 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Where did I put all that stuff? 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I mixed the tartar, the salt, and the soda all together right here. Okay. 1/3 cup of shortening.
Now, what kind of shortening are you using?
What we had at the store, Crisco.
Crisco is okay later on, but shortening would have been lard.
Lard. Okay.
Okay.
Proper lard.
Okay.
I actually use butter.
Butter is perfect. But now you see the problem is you're in Germany. Butter
Yes.
in Europe is different from butter in America. Butter in Germany is allowed to ferment a little bit before they churn it into butter. That's why it's yellow. In America, they churn the milk right away and then add 10% cream at the end. The butter in America isn't the same as the European butter. If you, at the store in America, if you buy, for instance, the Irish butter or the Danish butter and put it side by side with the American butter, you'll taste the difference. So yes, butter in Germany is fine.
Actually, I think in Marlene's days, butter was a high value. You know.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My mom just went and checked. The oven is 350 degrees. So mama's on that. Thanks, Mom.
Bravo, Mom.
She's very shy. She doesn't want to be on camera, but she's giving a lot of assistance off. Okay. 2/3 cup of sugar.
Yep.
And 2 eggs right here. And then 1 cup of mashed banana pulp we have right here. And 1/2 cup of finely chopped walnut meats. Had I known she loved pecans that much, I would have gotten pecans because I'm here in Georgia.
No, walnut's good. Walnut's good.
But
now, Carrie, one thing about the banana. There's 2 ways to mash a banana. You can mash it with a fork.
That's what I did.
All right. Or you can stroke the fork and peel it all the way through the skin with a fork. If you mash it with a fork, all right, it makes better for baking. But if, for instance, and this is a thing for you all to learn, it's a weird thing. If you scrape it with a fork and eat that, it'll help with diarrhea.
Oh.
It's another Marlene tip for you.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep, she taught us all that. As kids, if you had the trots, she would take a banana and she'd run the fork down it until it was all shredded, and then that somehow helped.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that, but okay, awesome. Okay, it says sift flour, measure and sift again. I don't have a sifter. I'm so sorry. It's back. I know it's back in LA. I'm so sorry, but I did get all-purpose flour, which I think is pretty well pre-sifted as far as I know.
You know why you had to sift the flour back then?
Tell me.
Because in the flour, particularly if you bought stone ground flour, which was still possible back then, it would have bits of stone in it sometimes. So you always wanted to make sure you removed anything that was foreign in the flour. Nowadays, all the flour is done so perfectly, you don't have to worry about that.
Ah, good. Okay. I don't want Dietrich to be mad at me. Okay. So we put the flour in here. All right. We'll put that in the mixing bowl along with the baking soda, the cream of tartar, and the salt.
Yep.
Okay. Now, let's see. Now we have the shortening, which I will put with the sugar. All right. Well, actually, it says, hang on, cream shortening, add sugar gradually.
Right.
Let's see. I may have to get another mixing bowl to do this part. I'll be right back. Okay. All right. All right. Got the shortening in here.
Yep.
I'm going to work on creaming it, and then I will.
Well, you're using Crisco, so don't worry about creaming it. It's creamed.
Oh, okay.
See, again, if you had lard, it would be in lumps. And so you'd be creaming it to make it smooth. Crisco's already smooth, so you're fine.
So I'm stirring up my Crisco with my sugar right now.
Good.
It says add eggs 1 at a time. Do you know why she had the 1 at a time thing?
Yeah. What you want to do is you want the eggs to be slightly broken apart and emulsified with the ingredients, not so they clump, because you've got a mixture there that'll hold pockets of egg. You want to make sure the egg is well distributed.
Okay, I'm going to add 1 egg at a time here. All right, first egg. Stir that up really well. All right. And
Yeah,
now,
it's starting to get softer when you add another egg, so you will see. So mine worked pretty well.
okay, now I'm adding the second egg. Okay. All right. Now we're going to combine. So, okay, I've got my sugar and my egg combination here, which look at this go. It
Bear
is
in mind that her words there are beating well.
beating well. Yes.
That doesn't mean just stirring a couple of times. It means put some muscle into it.
All right. All right. While I'm muscling it, we should talk about other things that Dietrich made, because I've read a lot of stories about how if she knew someone was sick, she would make them soup. And
Yeah,
that,
always.
tell us about Marlene as cook, Marlene as grandmother.
Well, you know, one of the things that she was truly wonderful about is if anybody got sick, she would have made a wonderful nurse or doctor, to be honest. And there's a thing that she grew up with, I'm sure you know, Benjamin, called beef tea. And
Oh, yes.
what you do is you take in America, you take a ball jar, it's about that big, it holds a quart, and you cut cubes of meat with no fat. You cut the cubes of meat, you stuff them in the jar, no water, no liquid, no nothing. You screw the lid on tight, and then you boil it for 6 hours. And all the goodness from the meat goes to the bottom of the jar. And in 1 tablespoon of this liquid, you get about a half a pound of meat goodness. And I have had, it's kind of a weird way to put this, but I've had the chance for 4 or 5 of my friends who've been cancer victims having chemotherapy who just cannot eat. You know, they just don't want to eat because they're sick. You give them beef tea and the doctors say, we don't understand. Her blood is good, everything is going fine because that beef tea has so much goodness in it. So she grew up with that. If somebody was just with a cold or something, she would make, you know, soup for them and bring it in a thermos to their house, and they would have, you know, whether it be beef soup or chicken soup. She was really good at helping people who were not feeling well. And then she was fascinated. My other grandmother, my father's mother, did the old Italian thing. And you take an egg yolk, you put sugar with it, and you beat it up. And when a child is sick, you give them the egg yolk that is sweet, but the egg yolk has a lot of goodness for them without having to eat. And she thought that was pretty useful. She used to use that on children a lot who didn't want to eat if they were sick.
Well, I beat this pretty well, I think. And so it says add dry ingredients alternatively with banana pulp. So I just combine these two things together at this point.
Yeah.
Peter? Okay, all right. I'm going to add this, all right, to the dry ingredients. And then we're going to stir in the banana pulp. I've been stirring like a fiend. My arm is sore, so I'm hoping.
Well, that's good.
Hoping that means I did.
I watched Marlene make, there's a beautiful, delicious product that you get in Germany. In America, we call them jelly donuts, but it's not quite. Berliners are just fantastic. You know what I'm talking about, Benjamin, right?
Oh, yes, Berliners, yes.
Oh, yeah. That's why she loved it when Kennedy said, "Ich bin ein Berliner," you know. She said, he's a jelly donut, you know.
Yeah, that's a great tradition. You have them for New Year's Eve,
Yeah,
actually.
she always made them when she was with us at that time of year. And they are so good, so rich. But I watched her make them in the kitchen. She rented a house off of Sloane Square in London. And I watched her making them. And for about an hour and a half, she was stirring. I mean, I'm talking about muscles. She just kept at it. There was no machinery involved. It's all handmade. And she made the best Berliners. You couldn't imagine how good they were. She'd make about 3 or 4 dozen. You know who would come over? Finding out she's in town making Berliners, Noel Coward. He would show up and say, no, I have some, I have to take it. And he had boyfriends and stuff. And he'd take away a dozen with him because they were just so good. They were fabulous.
Yeah, I love how she how she carried traditional German food to Hollywood even.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, absolutely. But also, you know, she used to refer to Berlin as an island. You know,
yes.
It's a completely different place of Germany. And of course, she grew up with knowing Russians and Poles and Jewish and not Jewish and this and that and Lutheran and that, all the different things. And so she had all this in her head. I mean, Poppy told me that he never had borscht that was as good as Marlene's. But that's hardly a German thing, but Now, on the other hand, if she could get hold of really good goose fat, oh boy, she'd be putting it on the toast for it. Anybody can, you try that. What is it? Eat it first, then tell me if you like it. And everybody, of course, loves speck. Oh yeah, absolutely, we love it. Then she tell you what it is. You go, really? I'm eating goose fat?
But in your mother's book, how she talks about your grandfather, Rudolf Siever, he did not like to have borscht without rye bread. So she would carry these long clutch purses so she could carry the rye bread in her purse and whip it out so he could have it with borscht in a restaurant.
Okay, do you know the most famous handbag made by Hermes was a copy of the handbag she had made so that she could take a half a loaf of bread because she was so outraged that they'd gone to the restaurant, I forgot the name of the restaurant in Paris, for this Russian meal. And the head waiter had come over and said, I'm sorry, Herr Sieber, that there was a fire at the bakery and we don't have any black bread. And my grandfather said, oh, I understand completely. We're leaving. And 16 people got up to leave. And she was outraged at that. She thought that's the height of, bad manners, whatever. So the next day she had the sellier, the saddle maker, make her a handbag. Women didn't have big handbags at that time. It just wasn't done. She had this handbag made. She could put half a loaf of bread in. And it caught on as a fashion item. Until today, you can pay $5,000 for a Hermes handbag that Marlene invented because she was pissed off at Poppy. It's a weird world, really. It's kind of fun. But Poppy was a gourmet. You wouldn't believe how knowledgeable he was with food and wine. My godfather, Jerry Thor, lived in California, and Jerry Thor knew all about American wines. And Poppy, of course, being European, knew all about European wines. About once a month, Jerry Thor and Poppy would meet at Poppy's ranch out in San Fernando Valley, 14265 Polk Street. And they would have bottles of wine that they'd soak the labels off. So there was no label on the wine, and they'd have wine tasting. Poppy could tell you what side of the chateau the grapes were grown on, what year, who handled the wine. I mean, he was absolutely incredible. Nobody could ever fault him. Never, you just couldn't fault him. He had an incredible palate, Poppy, a man of great refinement, really. Not the nicest guy in the world, but a man of great refinement.
We've got the walnuts right here.
Good.
This batter to where it is pretty darn creamy.
Good.
So I'm gonna add the walnuts and stir this in. Did Marlene have any Christmas traditions that she would share with you and your family, Peter?
She hated getting Christmas gifts. When I heard one of the things you sent me is that she hated Christmas. No, she loved Christmas, particularly if there were children. She loved the joy of children Christmas, but she hated Christmas gifts because she knew that it made people uncomfortable. What the hell do you give her? She's my grandmother and I had to give her something. And I started a weird tradition by accident in a way. In 1955, the big ballpoint company, she found out that they made green ink pens and she liked the green ink. So for Christmas, I took my $3 or $4 and I went out and I bought a bunch of green pens and I wrapped it and it was under the tree. And she's dreading the children giving her something and wasn't a dishonest person. So if you give her something that she really doesn't need, she's, oh, that's nice, thank you so much. And she'd give it to my mother and my mother understood, we'll find somebody else to have it. Well, I gave her these green pens and she almost cried. She was just, somebody understands me, a practical gift. And for the rest of her life, I always gave her pens or something that she wanted for work rather than anything. Because it was, what the hell else are you going to get somebody like her? But you want to give your grandmother something. in your limited way. So I found out the secret was give her something practical, practice.
I think she loved to write in green ink. I have some
Yep.
autographs. She autographed them in green ink.
Yep. She always stuck with green ink. Yep.
All right, let's pour this into the pan now.
Yeah, I'm hoping you greased it well.
I greased it very, very well. Absolutely. Now, my mom suggested adding a little combination of cinnamon and sugar on the top. So I hope you don't mind. I'm gonna do that as well.
You're making it even more American.
Pardon?
You know, by the way, remember that in the 30s, cinnamon was a rare thing. I mean, it wasn't,
That's
it
true.
isn't like today.
That is true.
And vanilla was a rare thing too. Later on in life, she would put some vanilla essence in her baking, but she didn't back, you know, the old traditions with no vanilla because you couldn't get hold of vanilla.
No.
It really makes us grateful for what we have today. I mean, I think it's easy to take stuff for granted in our modern world, but I know because of the pandemic, for a while in LA, there were a lot of things you couldn't get. It was impossible. So it kind of makes me very grateful when I go to the store now and I can find what I need and it's not a struggle. You know, that's kind of a big deal.
Agreed.
All right, so I've got it in the pan here. Here's what it looks like.
Looks good.
All right, I'm gonna put a little bit of cinnamon and sugar on top and I'm gonna go pop it into the oven. Okay, be right back.
It's fun. So Benjamin, how did yours turn out? Were you happy with it?
Yeah, I have it here. I did it so about like 3 hours ago, and it turned out like this.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Nicely
it
done.
tastes very good actually. So not that banana-ish, but very tasty. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the point. It's not too banana-ish,
Yes.
you know?
Here is
Absolutely.
my test bake looked like, because I usually bake all these things I do on these shows at least 1 or 2 times before I do it on camera.
Okay.
But here's how mine looked here.
Oh, beautiful.
So now we can do the deep dive into Dietrich. I can chill out. I've got the food made and I can relax.
All right.
The thing that always sticks with me is I've read over the years some critics who've made comments that, oh, she's just glamorous and she's, you know, a personality, but not really an actress. And I really disagree with that, because if you watch her, especially on a big screen, which I'm always, you know, think is the primary way to do it, just what she does with her eyes and the nuance of how she acts is really something to behold. I mean, years ago, I saw the Scarlet Empress on the big screen at the Egyptian Theater, and
Lovely.
wow, I mean, that just blows you away what she can do here to here, you know, on the big screen like that. And I think she was such a better actress than really she was ever given credit for being.
Well, Carrie, it boils down for me, and bear in mind that my tastes in motion pictures come from her and my mother and my father. My father's a scenic designer. My brother Michael was a scenic designer, production designer. So it's sort of in the family. For me, there's always been 3 different appearances of her in movies. There's the actress, there's the performer, and there's my grandmother. No Highway in the Sky, that's my grandmother. People want to know, what was she like as a grandmother? That's her. No Highway in the Sky is 100% Marlene, my grandmother, period. And sometimes I'll watch that movie just to remember what it was like having her as a grandmother. Then there's the actress. The job she did in The Blue Angel is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. The job she did in Judgment at Nuremberg is remarkable. And her best performance ever was in the director's cut of Touch of Evil. Only the director's cut. The movie was cut down by the studio and removed a lot of her scenes. In the director's cut, you say, well, who the hell is that woman? That's remarkable. And it's hard to know it's her. All the others are her as a brilliant performer. She understood the medium, the giant screen, the idolatry that goes with it. Not that she wanted the vanity side of that, but she knew what she had to do. You know, there was a great thing Robbie Lance said, Billy Wilder and Robbie and I were sitting down talking, and Billy Wilder said, I never really understood why Marlene was so magical on the screen. And Robbie Lance said, I'd tell you why. She didn't move. She made you, the viewer had to go to her. She didn't go to you. Greta Garbo was doing all of this, you know, Marlene was still, quiet, and you had to focus on her and you had to go to her. And she understood that right from the beginning. Now, I'm not saying von Sternberg didn't teach her. He did. His lighting was genius. I'm not saying even Mamoulian didn't teach her things. He did. You know, every director, every actor she worked with, I mean, Mae West taught her a lot of things as her friend. It's interesting who she'd learned from. You know, Cary Grant was a great friend and he taught her things. Charles Boyer taught her. She learned from everybody. But what she learned most of all was, I understand this medium. I understand the size of the screen. You have to go to her when she's on the screen. So your eye never leaves her. If she's on that screen, you're looking at her. Clark Gable can be that, whoever the hell, makes no difference. You're watching her. And she knew how to make that work as a performer. And so when she started her singing career, particularly after the Second World War, she applied the same techniques, very still, absolutely still on stage. That iconoclastic look of, and you had to go, she wasn't moving into, that's why when she did the Rockettes, when she's lit, you know, her leg and everything else was such a rarity, because that's unlike her to be physically present in that way on stage. So she did some incredible movies that over the years not only stood the test of time, but are being looked at by modern audiences and go, wow, what the heck is that? That's not like anybody else. And she was like nobody else. The only other person who understood the medium as well as she did, a female I'm talking about, probably was Kate Hepburn. But Kate Hepburn had an agenda. And so every role that she played, she infected it with her agenda, which either made people love her or hate her. But Marlene always thought that Kate was quite remarkable. And of course, Audrey later on, but this was after Marlene's time. Marlene loved Audrey Hepburn's performances. She hated her performance in My Fair Lady, which was a pity. But that's also because she and my brother and I and everybody got a chance to see Julie Andrews on stage in My Fair Lady. And once you see Julie Andrews in My Fair Lady, nothing else was going to work. It just couldn't work. You know, I just...
The stillness of Dietrich. Before the pandemic, I was lucky enough to get to see Morocco on a giant screen in LA. And
that's wonderful.
Some of the scenes in that, when she does move, it says something, you know, it's like
right.
That motion is kind of saved for the right moments. Or in Shanghai Express, when she goes into that train area and she looks up at that light and then her hand kind of shakes. It's just, I was seeing that on a big screen in LA and the whole audience just gasped. You could just hear this, like go through the whole theater, you know.
That's lovely.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, the woman had tremendous talent. There was a guy called Lou Stumans. I don't know if any of your viewers know who Lou was. He made a movie called The Black Fox that she did the narration on. And it's a very important documentary about something that was important to Marlene. But Lou Stumans said that the thing about Marlene was she's the easiest person in the editing room to work with, because she could do exactly the same thing again and again and again and again to within a quarter of an inch of movement. So that for an editor, relying on other actors doing their job properly, they never had to worry about her. Her performance was going to be locked in stone. And that's why Mamoulian had trouble with her, because Mamoulian wanted her to do more variations. And she said, no, this is the way it should be done. And she was right.
I read that she also taught her co-stars, like Jimmy Stewart, when they had this scene where they looked at each other, she taught him, well, you can just concentrate on one eye. So yeah. Interesting. Yeah. All these little details.
And it's the left eye.
Okay.
Always the left. Okay. You want to know who it is you're talking to, don't look at the right eye, always look at the left. She taught us that too.
Oh, great.
The right eye shows the right eye shows what you've been through in your life. The left eye shows who you are.
What,
Good
Peter,
to know.
favorite Dietrich film of all of them? What stands out for you?
Well, when I want to see my grandmother, I see No Highway. But when I want to see a performance, I have to say I was so surprised by the director's cut of Touch of Evil that really stands out for me as a remarkable picture. But there's so many pictures I greatly enjoy that she made. It's hard to pick one or the other. The other night there was Witness the Prosecution on, and she's just a blast in that. She's just having, you can see her being Dietrich, absolutely. And then she gets disguised and she can be whatever the hell she wants. And she has such a good time doing that. It's just, you know, and then the studios, of course, were completely stupid on that whole thing. You know, they refused to nominate her for acting because they didn't want to spoil the surprise. And by that time, she and Hitchcock were at war of words. And so he didn't back her up. And that's, you know, years later, I think in the mid or late 70s, the Academy said that they'd like to give her a Lifetime Achievement Award, but they'd only give it to her if she came to Hollywood. And she said, well, either I deserve the award or I don't.
Point made.
You know, and so since they said, well, if you don't come, we're not giving it to you. She said, I understand. I don't really deserve it. That's fine. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way she was, you know, awards, nominations, all that stuff didn't really make any difference to her. It was a job and she did it well. You know, I was in London in Drury Lane Theatre, she was going to do a performance, and Joe Davis, the lighting man, one of the top lighting men in the whole world for theater, was on stage with her in a rehearsal, and they were arranging the lights. And I'm standing next to her, and she's looking up at the guy with the light right at the top, you know, up in the clouds. And she's going a little bit more. And the guy way up there says, I think it's right, fine, Miss Dietrich. And Joe Davis yells up, you do exactly what you're told to do and don't speak. Okay, so Joe Davis was angry at the guy for saying something to Marlene, and she went, fine. She said to Joe, that's where it'll be. So I took Joe aside later and I said, Joe, what the hell was all that about? I mean, it was a little bit of a tense moment between him and the guy up in the clouds. And Joe said, well, he wasn't listening to her. She knows when the light's perfect because she looks straight at the light, and when it burns her eyes, she knows it's focused. Now, there's a second part to that. Where she was standing, normally when you go on stage, you put a piece of tape like an X, because this is where you're going to stand. She never, ever, never needed that. She knew exactly how far to walk, exactly where the spot was. She never missed her spot. Never once. Different kind of training, different kind of approach to life. You do it right, you don't do it at all. And that light was perfect every time.
That was, I think, when your mother wrote about it, when she was doing the dress rehearsals for her concerts. She was standing there and she knew exactly how to fix one sequin. She said, okay, stop, now fix it. So yeah. It was remarkable.
Yeah, I talked to, I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name, I'm sorry. Jean-Louis. I talked to Jean-Louis about 30 years ago, something like that. And he said, oh, your grandmother was the greatest pain in the ass ever to work. You make an outfit for her for the stage and it just had to be right. And I can't tell you how many thousands of sequins we had to move till they moved properly when she had to walk 10 feet. For that 10 feet, who cared? She cared. But he loved her, you know, he loved her because she wanted it right. And none of, you know, the other thing is, Carrie, you have to realize, each one of these sequins was crystal glass. There was no plastic. You go to Berlin and you pick up that Vegas dress, it weighs 25 to 30 pounds.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's something, They're really impressive.
One of the things I enjoyed about your mother's book was that the collaboration between Travis Banton and Marlene.
Oh yeah.
Because that really was a collaboration. She didn't just show up and try on clothes. This was a, what if we use this feather? What if we use this kind of satin? Like, she knew exactly what she wanted.
It drove von Sternberg nuts, completely nuts, because she would, with Travis Banton, they would conceive an outfit that was not possible to light properly for the film that there was at that day and age. And Joe von Sternberg, just had to keep on finding a way to light her, because they'd make these crazy costumes with a feather, half the eye, and the thing on the top, and the, oh my God. But also you have to realize that that's what Dior once said about her when he was doing his A-line and everything. And people think that he did the A-line and then Dietrich wore it. Actually, she modeled for him some of the A-line things before they were released. So she was part of that collaboration as well. And Dior said, the only woman he ever knew who had no popo, no rear end, so that the things would hang properly. And that she could stand still for 4 or 5 hours without moving, without a break, so that he could do his job. She was the perfect mannequin. And Ginette Spanier, who ran Balenciaga, said that Marlene would come in and all the seamstresses would come and kiss her and say thank you, because they knew what they were making something special for, because she would insist that it was right. No shortcuts, no nothing else. Now, on the other hand, she loved jeans. Go figure. She loved Lee jeans and Levi jeans. She wore them and she loved them and had no problem wearing them. And she loved the freedom it gave her, particularly in America. It gave her this freedom of nobody cares. So I can actually at rehearsal be relaxed and, all the rest. But the idea of her going to a supermarket, not looking perfect, no, didn't exist.
Well,
It had to be right.
I've always been so drawn to how she could be so ultra feminine and super glamorous in sequins one day, and then be wearing a full men's tuxedo or a naval suit or military gear the next. I just love that the way she was able to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, there's nothing she couldn't pull off. I mean, there was a joke in the family that Danny Thomas did in the Second World War. She and Danny Thomas were the act together. She was the sex, he was the comedian for the soldiers in the field. And Danny Thomas used to at breakfast, shake his finger at me and say, your grandmother, she tried to get us killed every single day. If there was 5 minutes of light left, we'd get back on the truck, we'd go and find 5 soldiers in a foxhole, and we do the whole routine while the howitzers are going overhead. She tried to get us killed. But he taught her so much about timing, about the finesse you need to deal with an audience, how to allow the audience the time to absorb what you're saying and how to say it. Now, she wasn't a comedian, but that same timing that he had, he taught her. And then Billie Holiday, although Marlene didn't know Billie Holiday, but Billie Holiday's records and then Frank Sinatra taught her better vocal timing, when to lead the music and when to follow the music. And of course, Burt Bacharach, being her arranger and conductor, he was brilliant. And Burt is a wonderful human being for the job that he did, not only for her, but for music generally. But it's an interesting, when you have a person who's as intelligent as Marlene on pretty much any subject, it tells you that that's a person who wants to learn, who is desperate always to learn and to absorb. One of the questions you sent me to ask me if I would consider them, what would she think of the internet? My God, she would love the internet. Yeah, holy cow. She would be Zooming every day with people all over the world. And that's, $5,000 phone call, free internet, no question. Easy decision. She'd be happy. As my mother said once, the greatest pity about Marlene's career is that she never directed a movie or a television show, because she had that ability to aid and assist people, and she knew what was right and what was wrong and what worked and what didn't work. At some point, people are going to find outtakes, somewhere. They're in a basement somewhere or whatever. They'll find an outtake from some of the movies she did and say, my God, why didn't they leave that in? Why did they take that out? Well, editing is a different art form and a practice. But Marlene, when allowed to, would do things that broke the mold. That's why Orson Welles loved working with her, because when you see the director's cut of Touch of Evil, you can see impromptu moments that she's put in that as an actress. She's given free rein by him. Do anything you want, Marlene. Here's the script. You take over. And when she takes over, it's powerful stuff. And the biggest problem she had was Chuck Heston. I mean, but that's just Chuck.
That period of Dietrich's life that's always fascinated me was her military service, because she threw herself so 100,000% into the war effort. And it's like she wasn't just happy to serve coffee at the Hollywood canteen or do dishes there. I mean, she, of course, as you know, risked her life day and night all across the front. And I wonder if do you think that was like the happiest period of her life? Because it kind of seems like it was.
It absolutely was. It's the most fulfilling. Happy is perhaps the wrong word. Mom used the word happy, but I think it's most fulfilling. It's when she felt she was doing something important and valuable to humanity. I mean, she really felt constructive at that period of time, and whatever was required, put aside puritanical mores and morals and values and everything. If what was needed was for a soldier to have a full-on kiss in order to make him feel human again, and the rationale for him being there, she would do that. There was no question. If it meant having breakfast with the boys and cooking eggs for them in the field, she would do that. Whatever was required for the end purpose, because she was so against authoritarianism and fascism to her very core. If you're a Berliner, it's hard for people to understand what Berlin was like. That was the most open city in the world. There was every religion possible living next door to each other. There was a liberal intelligentsia in Berlin that understood that humanity is more important than petty boundaries. And Berlin was unique. And she hated that it was destroyed. People say to me, oh, was she happy to be a German? I said, my grandmother was never German. I mean, she spoke German, auch Deutsch. But the fact is, she was a Berliner through and through. She was a Berliner, a Prussian family, Berlin, period. And so when the wall came down, that meant everything for her. It wasn't just that Germany was reuniting, it's that Berlin was reuniting. And that meant everything to her. And as an aside, she had my brother and I and my mother and my father, oh, there's a cemetery down near Lyon. I want you to go see it and see if that's where I should be buried. We'd go down and we'd look at it and take pictures and send them to her. No, it's not quite right. She kept on describing what she wanted for a cemetery. Only when Berlin was reunited, she said, okay, I can be buried next to my mother. We went, okay, that's fine. Well, when I went to see the graveyard, it's exactly what she'd been telling us to look for all these years, with the birch trees, with the ivy. I mean, it was this, clearly in her head, she had where her mother was buried is the perfect place to be buried herself. And for her, the notion that she could be buried back in Berlin was a great relief to her. She was born Lutheran, married a Catholic, my grandfather. And so rather uniquely, we had a Catholic service in Paris at the Madeleine, and then she's buried in a Lutheran cemetery as a Lutheran, that she was born as a Lutheran. So it was very fitting, the whole thing, that it came full circle the way she wanted it to. Of course, that's her. It's going to end up the way she wants it to be. I was there when she passed away, and it couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been more lovely. She was on the couch in the living room with the photographs of all the people she loved on the wall. People always think that she had pictures of herself on the wall. She never did. She had pictures of people she loved. And her poster was on every billboard in France had her poster because it was the Cannes Film Festival, and her image happened to be chosen that year for the film festival. And the geraniums were in full bloom on her balcony. That's her favorite potted flower. And it was a beautiful sunny day, and she closed her eyes and went to sleep. And that's exactly the best. I can't think of a better way to pass on. It was lovely.
And I think I love the fact that when I go to Berlin, I always go to the film museum and I see her picture, but everywhere in the street. So there's a mural and there's the star of the Hollywood, not Hollywood, but the Boulevard of Stars of Berlin. So I think that Berliners really celebrate her and give tribute to her. So
there's an interesting thing, Benjamin, you may know, is when she passed, I brought all the storage to a farm near me, a barn that was empty. And there was storage in New Jersey, New York, in LA, Paris, there was some stuff in England. We brought it all there and started to organize it. And Sotheby's helped us catalog and everything else, because the IRS in America, when John Lennon died, his widow, Yoko Ono, declared all his private papers as no value. And then 6 or 8 months later, gave them to a university for a $6 million tax deduction. So the IRS modified what we call estate tax, but it's basically a death tax. They modified it, and it's called the Yoko Ono codicil. And the Yoko Ono codicil says that if you're a famous person, IRS definition of famous, if you're a famous person, every single item in your possession is worth $10 unless you prove otherwise.
Okay.
So I'm looking at just the number of things that I have, and we're looking at a $2 million death tax. She died $200,000 in debt, and I'm looking at $2 million to give the IRS. So I said, how the hell are we going to do this? And the IRS said, well, it's very simple. You either give it away, you destroy it, or you sell it and pay us the money. And I went, none of that's acceptable. It's the preeminent art form of the 20th century, and I don't want to destroy it. So I went and saw the Smithsonian. I went and saw LACMA. I went and saw the Metropolitan Museum, MoMA. Well, we'll take 1 or 2 pieces, a couple of photographs. I said, the photograph collection is 25,000 items taken by Eisenstadt and Stieglitz and Penn and
Invaluable.
1 or 2, what? The whole thing was, MoMA said, well, we'll take 1 Vegas dress. And I said, well, what about the 6 other? Well, we have no interest. It was really frightening. And of course, there was no Academy Museum at that time. That's new. Thank God for Steven Spielberg pushing that. And so I didn't know quite what to do. And I get this phone call from Ulrich Roloff Moment, who was a senator for culture for Berlin. Ulrich had a budget of $660 million for the city of Berlin. Okay, that's more than the entire United States federal and local budgets for museums. He had it for the city of Berlin. And he said, Peter, we need Dietrich, the anti-Nazi, back in Berlin. We want an example of somebody who wasn't a Nazi, who was world famous in Berlin. And that was a political argument we couldn't escape. So that's why everything went to Berlin. And they have been absolutely wonderful there. Carrie, it's hard for Americans to understand the devotion these people have to protecting things that they see of value. All the paper, letters, photographs, everything, were put in a tent, injected with a gas. The gas was taken out, injected with a second gas taken out, a third gas to make sure there's no nits or eggs or things nothing. And these pieces of paper will be good for 10,000 years. That's the meticulousness that they approach the thing. And Barbara Schroeder, who you probably met her, haven't you? Barbara Schroeder, in charge of costumes.
Yes, I'm in touch with her. Yeah.
She's absolutely one of the nicest human beings you can meet. But when you go and look at how she's preserved Marlene's costumes and everything, it just makes your heart warm. These are good people. And Silke Ronenberg, who is our contact there, you couldn't meet a nicer person, but their degree of excellence, you can't find that in an American museum. I'm sorry to say that, you just can't, because there's no ego involved in what they do. They're doing, here comes that flicked word again, they're doing the right thing for the preservation of this material, because Marlene didn't have a lot of private stuff. This is all part of the preeminent art form of the 20th century, and preserving it is a wonderful thing. It's a great thing. And in fact, the Academy Museum has had people go to Berlin to learn how to do it. And I'm hoping they,
she's really the center of the museum. And I love that they changed the dresses from time to time. So it's not always the same. You can go, every time I'm in Berlin, I go there and I see a different dress. So that's very interesting.
Benjamin, have they taken you into the storage where they have all the old projectors and cameras?
No, not yet. I was asking for it when we did the show with the potato salad. Yeah. And we had a very nice email contact, and I asked, well, do you have like app prints or recipes or things? And they said, no, there aren't any cookbooks or recipes, because I think she had them all in mind. I don't know.
Yeah, she knew what she was making. My favorite thing she ever made was, there's a product in English called aspic, and she would do cooked bouillon. She would boil l'arrêt, skate, we call it in America. She'd boil it with dill, and then she'd put it in aspic, and she would send these glass tubs of this beautifully preserved cooked fish to my wife and I in London. And I tell you what, that's better than any caviar I ever had. It's just wonderful. She was she also had a way of cooking where she understood the food. She understood the texture. She understood how to cook it. I mean, when she did schnitzel, for example, my mother actually makes better schnitzel than Marlene, which is kind of a family thing. But the schnitzel that Marlene did, you start with a medium temperature pan, then you immediately turn it all the way up until it makes those breadcrumbs crisp. Then you turn it over on low heat to cook, and then you turn it right up at the end, because it should come out dry. So often you go to a restaurant and you get schnitzel or breaded chicken or breaded pork or whatever, and it's all mushy because they don't know how to cook it. But she instinctively knew how to cook everything properly.
She should have written a cookbook, actually.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, my mother and she should have. They should have done it together. But it's okay. It happens.
Questions from the viewers here on YouTube, because on Facebook rather. Let's see, I've got a couple people saying they do plan to make beef tea. So I think the beef broth tea is definitely going to make a comeback here. So.
Well, it is. I tell you what, it's if you're not sick, put a little bit of onion salt on it, and it's absolutely fantastically delicious. And if you're on a diet, by the way, save the juice for the children, which will give them strength and iron, and eat the boiled meat with onion salt. It's almost no calories and it's delicious.
Wow. Jim McLaughlin says, my dad met her in World War II. He was in France. She wished a general happy birthday and gave him a cake. Photo in the last post you put up, Carrie. So someone whose dad met her in World War II. That's really cool.
That's nice.
There was no one like Marlene. Yes, that is so true. Rick Carl wants to know, Peter, two quick things. How is Maria Riva, your mom, doing? And second question, what is the single most thing you miss about Dietrich?
First of all, my mother, born on the 13th of December, just turned, she had her 97th birthday and she's in her 98th year. I try and tell her to slow down a little bit, but she likes going shopping on her own. And she's living with my niece, Samantha, in Rio Rancho. And, like any other 97, 98-year-old, she has her good days and bad, but she's sharp as a tack mentally, just like Marlene. And she's a great human being, always has been. And she says funny things to me, because my mother has that same Galgan humor. She says, what am I waking up for in the morning? What am I doing for anybody? This is ridiculous, But that's very much like Marlene. If she's not being productive, it's not worth being a burden on people. And so that's okay. We tell mom we love her anyway. The thing I miss most about Marlene was her ability intellectually to focus in on what's important. I saw her talk with Linus Pauling, a Nobel Prize winner once. And within the scope of the conversation, he was listening to her opinion raptly because she had dissected what his chemistry background was and added that as a parable to what she learned from Fleming, who did penicillin. And she was pointing him in a completely new direction. And it was just a freakish thing that somebody that smart who could connect the dots. When Gorbachev was under house arrest in Georgia, not Georgia, America, Georgia in Asia, the world was, screaming to get him released and everything else. And Marlene was on the phone to Ronald Reagan and this one and that one. And they're all, she was working the phone lines to put pressure to get Gorbachev released. And when he did get released and everything, the first person he thanked was the BBC, because he could listen to the BBC World Service on his little radio in Georgia. And then he called her in Paris to thank her for her help. Now, it's kind of weird. Nancy Reagan called me 2 days after they left the White House. Nancy Reagan called me. She said, Peter, I called Marlene in Paris and she wasn't there. The maid was there and she's not available. Is she okay? We just want to make sure because, the last phone call that Ronnie made from the White House, the very last phone call was to Marlene. And I'm going, let me see if I got this straight. The most powerful guy in the world, the last phone call he made as president of the United States was to an aging actress in Paris. What's wrong with this picture? There's nothing wrong with it because she was that intelligent.
Her mind, it seems, was panoramic. That's kind of the phrase I would use to describe that.
It's a nice way of putting it. I see that. There wasn't an area of influence she couldn't meddle in. She was such a quick study. That's why I say if she could have had a chance to be a television director, or she did some radio directing, which nobody really knows about, that was really good. And Orson Welles said that she was a brilliant director of radio programs. But television she loved television. She loved the whole medium of television. She wishes she had gotten more involved in it. And as far as the internet is concerned, she'd be on Snapchat and all of these damn things. I hate them, but she'd have just eaten them up.
She'd be a major influencer on Instagram, Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She had, I think she was very much ahead of her time because she had she could have written blogs. I think she had columns in newspapers, which is now a blog maybe. And she was always interested. I hear that she had newspapers from France, Germany, the US. She was always informed about what was going on.
Yeah. Oh, no, totally. Just ask the concierge at the Plaza Athénée across the street, because they're the ones who had to bring her the newspapers every day. A big stack of them.
A food-related question, Peter.
Okay. Go ahead, Carrie.
I've always heard about Marlene Dietrich's famous scrambled eggs and how she insisted you use a fork to stir them and not a regular spatula. Can you talk about that? And Benjamin and I were talking about how she used a ton of butter in her scrambled eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Can you enlighten us about Marlene's scrambled eggs?
Okay, my wife and I had a small country house for a while in England, and Marlene came up to spend the weekend with us, and mom and dad were there, and we had the sort of family get together. And Marlene, she shows up, she's a matriarch, she wants the kitchen, she gets the kitchen. And she'd make breakfast, and she'd do toast and scrambled eggs is what everybody wanted, and bacon and so on. The problem is, I'm a fairly big guy, and I've eaten food all around the world, some of it great, some not so great. Her eggs were absolutely delicious, they're wonderful, but they were so rich that by the time you had a half a pound of butter with 3 eggs, your stomach was saying, I've had enough of this. But it was absolutely delicious, but really way too rich. But you see, she learned to do scrambled eggs in the Second World War. So for her, the richer the food could be, the better it is for the soldiers, because they are protein or fat deprived or whatever. Don't forget, this is in the middle of winter. She's cooking for soldiers. And so if she got eggs, powdered eggs, she'd find somebody who has lard or butter or oil or whatever, and she'd make scrambled eggs. And it was always delicious. But yeah, if I was outside fighting a war, I think I'd probably love the richness of the eggs, but in normal life, it's just too much. But were they good? Oh, hell yeah. She loved English bacon. It's one of the weird things, she loved English best back bacon. She didn't like American streaky bacon at all. But that British bacon, she just loved it because it had a big layer of fat on the top. And she thought that was just delicious.
What would you like for future generations to know about Marlene Dietrich? Because one of the things I feel really passionate about is talking about Hollywood history, not just to people who already know it, but to people who maybe don't know it, but might be curious to learn about it. And what would you like younger people who are maybe a blank slate to know about Marlene Dietrich and her legacy?
For me, her main legacy for humanity is that she found the strength to be what she wanted to be from inside. She didn't rely on other people. Fame meant nothing to her. Excellence meant everything. Doing it the right way meant everything for her. And if people can live by that credo, they can achieve pretty much anything they want to. She came out of a world that was totally destroyed. It was destroyed economically. It was destroyed politically. She went through a period of time in Germany between successive governments and riots and the Bolsheviks and the rise of the Nazi Party. And all of that she brushed off and kept true to her morals and her vision. And she persevered. And she found something that made a contribution, a positive contribution, and she stuck to it. She never deviated from that. For her, her ability to give people extreme pleasure and entertainment and a sense of somebody caring for them, particularly for her boys in the Second World War, she cared for these people and they knew it, they could tell. That was something that anybody can achieve if they set their mind to it. The world is a changing place at the moment. It's got a lot of dangers on the horizon, a lot of concern and worry, not just COVID, but politically and economically and the disparity in wealth and everything else. It isn't ambition that drove Marlene. It certainly wasn't vanity. She didn't care whether she looked beautiful or not, permanently or not. What she cared about, what she could do with what she had. She may do. She's 5'3", not that tall. She always looked a whole lot taller because she stood properly. She moved properly. She was careful to listen and then learn and then benefit from that. And everybody can do that if they set their mind to it. But we all take a shortcut, me included. We take shortcuts and say, well, that'll do. She never said that'll do. It had to be right or you don't do it at all. And so, yeah, people can find that in her. They can find it on the screen. They can find it in the radio broadcast. They can find it in my mother's book, which is a brilliant biography. I mean, it really is just absolutely brilliant. Marlene's, I don't know if you've seen Marlene Dietrich's ABCs, the book, which is launching this year. I mean, it's just, there's wit and wisdom in that book that, you know, I read it every once in a while. Actually, I've had a copy out because I was going to, this is the original 1972 edition. It was my brother Michael's. And inside she's written an inscription to him. And it says, to Michael, who only knows the loving heart of me, Massey, June 1962. And the book is, you know, full of simple things like, let me see, negligence, unforgivable. You know, little words of wisdom and understanding of life as she saw it. Actually, it's one of the best testimonies of her life, that book. It's great. I
Speaking of
wish it.
Dietrich's ABCs, University of Kentucky Press helped connect us here for this.
Yeah.
And they are releasing or re-releasing 3
Right.
Marlene Dietrich books this summer. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, one is Marlene's biography, autobiography that she wrote. And she wrote, I don't mean somebody else wrote. It has some inaccuracies in it because as any human being, she's entitled to see things the way she saw them. My mother's biography is dead balls on accurate, but that's why it was published after Marlene died, because my mother had no urge to punish her mother. Why make her face the truth at all? Marlene's truth was Marlene's truth. That's not to say Marlene's book is bad. It's wonderful, but it is particularly her vision of what her life was. Marlene Dietrich's ABC, as I said, is written in '62, and it's just a wonderful insight into who she was and what she believed in and how she saw things. There's a wonderful passages in there that I think people find so amusing at times about brassieres and America's obsession with breasts is rather funny, actually. She also, the Berlin collection has such a wonderful panoply of her life as a celebrity, as a film star, as a model for the camera, as a collector of excellent artifacts and things like that. My mother did the captions, and we published the book, and it's called Photographs and Memories, and they're bringing that out. And then what you maybe don't know, Carrie, is that there's a 4th book, which was published in Germany as Nachgedanken. Is the American version of that is being put together at the moment, and Kentucky are going to release that as well.
Oh, wow.
And it's her last thoughts and dreams and poems that she wrote in Paris. And again, it offers tremendous insight into the people that she knew and cared for.
When do these books come out, Peter?
The first 2 are coming out in the new year shortly, and then the illustrated one will probably come out before the summer, and then the 4th one, which hasn't got a working title yet, probably later in the year or early in 23.
Well, excellent. I really hope we can have you back when those books are released.
Of course.
And I think it shows how that he had such a good sense of humor, which is very Berlinish.
Yeah, she did. You know, she and Billy Wilder, I mean, although Billy wasn't from Berlin, he did have the Berlin sense of humor. And the 2 of them, I talked once to my brother Michael, who knew Billy better than I did. And Michael said, no. I went to dinner with Billy and Marlene once, and they talked in German the whole time and left me out of it, but they were giggling like children the whole time. So, you know, they loved each other, and the sense of humor, that Berlin humor, it's unique. It's hard for Americans to understand it because it always has a little twist to it, but it is wicked but fun.
Well, I love traveling. It's one of my greatest passions. And I've been to Europe several times, but I haven't been to Berlin yet. And the Berlin Museum and the Marlene collection, they are very much at the top of my bucket list when I get that.
Good for you. Good for you. And when you're in Berlin, I would say there's the church that she got married in, called the Gedächtniskirche. And there's a funny family story about that, because when Poppy and Marlene got married, they were walking down the steps. Her hem of her dress caught in her heel and she tripped a little. And Poppy said, "Hoppla." And she never forgave him, never forgave him for saying "hoppla" after she just got married to him. And it was a family thing that when she wanted to punish him on the phone, when she was angry with him over something or other, she'd say, "Hoppla, conversation over, hang up." I mean, it was just, you know, the woman never forgot anything. And the other thing in Berlin to see is, and my friends at the museum will laugh because they know I always say this, there's a museum in Berlin called the Technisches Museum, and it is one of the finest technical museums in the world, and they have a train collection there that is absolutely second to none, and I would urge you to enjoy going through the trains. Have you been to it?
I haven't.
I haven't been yet.
Benjamin, you have to go. You have to
Okay.
go. It's
Yeah, so there are many interesting museums. They have the Nefertiti there. And,
yeah. Oh, that's not to be missed. That's remarkable. I'm
Yeah.
wondering when they're going to be made to give it back to Egypt. You know, this new thing of the museum should give back all the artifacts that were looted from. They're not looted from Egypt. They were saved. You know, I mean, if they'd left the Elgin marbles in the Parthenon, the Turks would have destroyed them. They rescued them. I understand the cultural need to give the culture back to the country, but to use words like you stole them or looted them, to me, that's not right. The Nefertiti is a perfect example. I mean, you may not know what this is, Carrie. It's a bust of Queen Nefertiti. It is the most perfectly intact, colored bust of this incredibly beautiful woman. And it's in the museum in Berlin. It's one of the marvels of the world to see that. It really is.
I have a little story. I once did a tour in Berlin, and I had the chance to sneak into her birth house, actually.
Ha!
So, and they have all, of course, the letters, the names of the people who lived there, and there are still pictures of her in the hall, and there's one sign saying M. Dietrich, actress, and there are all the names of the other people who live there now, of course. So
That's cool. I
love
like
that.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think Benjamin needs to help me put together a Marlene Dietrich tour of Berlin so I can get a very
Of course.
comprehensive experience.
Great idea. Get Silke to help you.
Yes, I know. I will. Yeah,
Silke.
I'm in touch with her.
Yeah, she's great. She'll help. She knows a lot of secret places that I didn't know about.
Excellent. Well, Peter, if you have any other recipes we could make on future episodes of Hollywood Kitchen, send them my way. I would be delightful to
I'll do that.
recipes with you. I find that Marlena is kind of like, if you will, the gift that never stops giving. We could do a zillion episodes on her and never run out of things to talk about.
Okay. Well, how about when the book's launched? I'll get a couple of recipes together from my mother that Marlena used to cook, and I'll send them to you.
That would be fantastic. And I really admire your mother. She is a beautiful woman, a great writer, a really incredible, powerful force in her own right. So please give her my best. Her book is
I will.
riveting.
Absolutely. I love the picture you took of her in the supermarket, and there was underlined, still have to do your own shopping. So I love that. Yeah.
You know, but the funny thing is, a lot of people have sent me messages saying, good for her, she's buying Jell-O. That's good for old people. They went through what was in the cart. I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, I loved it.
So much for joining us today in Hollywood Kitchen. And of course,
Thank you,
tomorrow,
Karen.
December 27th, is Marlene
It is.
Dietrich's birthday. So if
You know, there's a funny story, because in Europe, you write the one with an upstroke and a downstroke. And when she was getting her American passport, they saw that as a 4. So they changed her birthday to the 4. So in America, she was always younger than she actually was.
nothing wrong with that.
She didn't care. We just found it funny in the family.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Benjamin.
Dietrich,
Thank you.
tomorrow in celebration.
Nice seeing you guys. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Thank
Benjamin.
you.
Thank you for joining me.
Are you baking that? Are you baking that thing now? Is it
Yes,
baking?
let me go check on it. Let me go check on it right now.
Has it been an hour already?
I think so. It's over an hour. Yeah.
My mom says it's
Should have been finished.
so it's
Okay,
still in there.
not yet.
You can smell it. I wish you could smell it.
Yeah, you know what? Where the hell is smell-o-vision? They can invent everything else, but I want smell-o-vision back.
I agree.
When I was a kid, Michael, Marlena, my mother, and I, we went to off Broadway, actually on 46th Street, Broadway. There was a theater that had smell-o-vision, a movie, and it was a documentary of China. And they pumped the smells in of the jasmine or the Yangtze River. It's still, my brother and I said that was the best movie experience we ever had. And, you know, they've got to bring that back. Damn it.
I agree. I think that is due for a comeback.
I agree. Well, thanks again, folks. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
holidays from all of us at Hollywood Kitchen.
Thank you. Bye, Carrie.
Bye.
Bye.